15 years or so, I think we've seen a number of important trends in international research on corruption and good governance. There are many such trends, but I want to highlight three that I think are particularly notable. The first I would describe as a shift in focus from the macro to the micro. What I mean by that is there's an increasing amount of research that instead of trying to look at cross-national comparisons with the complex phenomenon of corruption aggregated to a single measure at the country level, there's been an increasing focus on research that looks at particular jurisdictions, that looks within countries, that looks at particular kinds of corruption or particular sectors or certain kinds of transactions. So again, whereas the research from the mid-1990s and then for the next 15 or 20 years emphasize cross-national comparisons and big picture questions like, is corruption correlated with economic growth or is corruption correlated with democracy? The more recent trends in the research have looked at more focused particular questions like, does disclosing information about government grants to local schools in publicly accessible format lead to less money missing from those schools? Second, we have seen a shift in the strategy for addressing the problem that corruption is inherently difficult to measure. Corruption is a hidden activity. The people who engage in it have an incentive to keep it secret, and it's also not the kind of thing that just lends itself to easy quantification. But for those researchers who want to engage in something like quantitative empirical analysis, you need to find some way to address that problem. I mentioned that most serious anti-corruption research before the mid-1990s was either theoretical or used qualitative case studies, and that's still extraordinarily valuable, and many people are still using that approach. I'm speaking right now for those people who wanted to engage in a more systematic quantitative empirical study. So whereas the focus in the previous generation, that period I described from the mid-90s on, was on using perceptions as a proxy for reality, more recent research has resorted to a range of other kinds of techniques, including what is sometimes referred to as forensic economy. That's just a term meaning looking for clues, indirect evidence of the existence of the hidden behavior that we care about, and then deriving from that a quantitative measure that we can use that's not simply based on asking either local citizens or international experts, how corrupt do you think this country is, give it a score on a 1 to 10 scale. The third important trend, that's the problem of determining causation. So we can take a bunch of data about corruption and a bunch of data about other factors we might care about, economic growth, foreign direct investment, political freedom, press freedom, transparency, whatever, and we can run some regressions and we can get some correlations. For example, the relationship between corruption and per capita income, national wealth. Countries that are wealthy, that have higher per capita incomes, on average, have lower levels of corruption, at least according to these perception measures. Well, what does that tell us? It is possible that what it tells us, it is easier for rich countries to fight corruption.